Welcome everyone to a practical introduction to biomedical text mining in the era of deep learning. This is ISMB 2020 tutorial number 4. I'm Robert Leaman. I'm one of the presenters. And looking at the time here, it's about time to get started. Somebody wave me down if my audio is not coming through clearly, please. Just a quick introduction. We have the presenters for the tutorial. There's 4 of us. Jiang Lu is Deputy Director for Literature Search at NCBI and also Senior Investigator. He unfortunately will not be able to join us today. Cecilia Araki is a research professor at the University of Delaware and also works is the lead for curation and text mining at several different databases, and also the head organizer for the biocreative text mining challenges. Qinyu Chen is a research fellow at NCBI NLM and also works extensively with deep learning methods for biomedical text mining. I'm a research scientist also at NCBI NLM, and I've developed several open source text mining systems, primarily for information extraction, that are widely used. So today, it's our schedule. It's broken into 4 different sections. The first couple of sections are primarily introductions. First one for biomedical text mining itself, and then for deep learning. Then we'll be doing a longer hour-long section for biomedical language models, which gets into some of the deeper concepts for deep learning. And then the last 45 minutes will be deep learning tools and data sets for biomedical text mining tasks. Towards the end of each of these sections, we'll have a couple of minutes for a couple of quick questions. We will likely have we should have the opportunity to get to everyone's questions, anything extensive at the end. And if you wouldn't mind continuing to mute yourself unless you're speaking, and feel free to use the chat function if to mention any technical issues or anything that you're experiencing. So let's go ahead and get started. So this first section, introduction to biomedical text mining. Biomedical text mining works with several different kinds of text. You can find, of course, published literature, such as you would find in PubMed and PubMed Central. But there's also electronic health records and social media, possibly even patents. The amount of literature is quite large. In fact, since 2000, it's just the published literature itself has more than doubled the amount that we get per year. Reading through the news, you can see quite a bit of interest in text mining. It's becoming much more widely used, not only for biomedical text, but also for, in general, for social media and so on. And biomedical text mining has been a part of ISMB for a very long time, originally as part of the BioLink Special Interest Group, and last year was a special session. This year we have a text mining cozy that will be meeting tomorrow, and we'd love to have you come and read all of participate and see some of the more cutting-edge research that's being done. To define biomedical text mining using Wikipedia, we have it refers to the methods and study of how mining can be applied to texts and literature in the biomedical, and here it says molecular biology domains, anything that could be in domains of biology or clinical work is within the umbrella of biomedical text mining. And the main idea, quite frequently, is to extract information that can then be turned into knowledge that is represented, say, in a database or some other computable format that we can then run large scale processes over, so that we can identify trends or hypotheses that can be followed up on in a sense that's a little closer to the typical bioinformatics research. Here we can see a variant of a particular gene and its relationship to Alzheimer's disease. Examples of text mining in action include the string database, which is very large and a large and widely used resource of protein interactions, which pulls information from many different sources, one of which is text mining. The paper discusses co-citation analysis across all of PubMed and also OMIM. Perhaps a little less obvious example of text mining in action is PubMed itself. PubMed has incorporated through the years many different aspects of text mining. One of its most popular features is the related articles feature, allowing readers who are looking at a paper to find articles that are closely related. Also, many other aspects related to identifying queries and spell checking. If you could mute our audio, thank you. Most recently, the best match feature sorts query results by relevance to the query, and used a very large data set of click-through data based on actual clicks by the users to train a deep learning method for associating high-quality PubMed matches with a query. The steps for discovery for text mining in this framework are 5. So the first step is just retrieving the articles themselves and then identifying entities or mentions within those articles that refer to interesting biomedical concepts. From there, we can extract those and then and identify them. And from there, that information can be integrated between multiple papers to identify trends or interesting and novel hypotheses. So to refer to one of the more basic tasks, this is named entity recognition and normalization. Given a text such as this, the first step will be to identify named entities. The green here are chemicals, and then the yellow ones are diseases. And then the second step after that will be to normalize them, that is, to ground them by linking them to a specific database entry. In this case, it's the medical subject headings mesh. And we can see from this example some of why text mining is difficult. At a high level, there are 2 primary reasons. The first one is variability, where there's many different ways to say essentially the same thing. And then the second one is ambiguity, where a specific bit of text can mean more than one thing. And both of these are quite pervasive issues throughout working with text. Just to give you a taste of language variation that's rather timely, here's one on COVID-19. Originally, authors publishing about COVID-19 could not specify anything more than just some basic symptoms. But then after these cause became known, authors began using names that referred to that. And then we had a standard name that was suggested by the World Health Organization. Interestingly enough, after this, authors have continued to introduce new names for COVID-19 or variations of symptomologies related to COVID-19. So we can see these names cluster, but also are each one of them will require some additional work to identify them correctly. So this is the sort of variation that we see in names, but also looking at relationships. The variation is also quite difficult. You can see all of these more or less refer to the idea that MET28 binds to DNA, and there's so many different ways of saying it, and each one of these will need to be correctly identified. So named entities also are ambiguous. So for example, this phrase here suggests a role for BRCA1 in HIF1 alpha regulation might be useful enough for a human reader to understand that this is the breast cancer gene. But in databases, the gene has a different identifier depending on which species is involved. And so one of the first things that needs to be done is to identify which species is being referred to, even if we can identify the gene correctly. Other examples include abbreviations. Here is an example with sugarcane polycosanol, which is being referred to as SCP. This sort of definition is important to identify because if you look across PubMed, for example, just for SCP, we can see a wide variety of things that are being used as SCPs being used as an abbreviation for. And while there are ones that are a bit more common than others, this is a long tail distribution. This is just the top 10. So it would not be reasonable to make any of these a particular guess just based on frequency. So since there are considerable issues here with variation and ambiguity, the progress has been pushed quite a bit by the community by introducing challenges. Here over time, you can see on the top are challenges related to the biological domain, and on the bottom are clinical challenges. You can see, for example, the TREC challenges, which are for information retrieval, which are long-standing. You can also see in red here, these biocreative ones introduce different challenges every year, and there's several also down here. I2B2 is a long-standing clinical challenge. What these challenges do is provide data sets that researchers can then work with and see if we can advance the state of the art by all addressing a single data set. The overall flow is for creating these challenges is you can see here up at the top left we have the organizers who not only solicit participants but also have to select the tasks and the documents that will be used, and then recruit domain experts in order to create annotations on those tasks. The participants are the ones who will then create systems to address the tasks that have been chosen, and then use the data sets that have been created to develop their systems, and then in the end to evaluate them. These text mining challenges have been quite successful in advancing the state of the art, and over the years have become much more difficult and also closer to the types of tasks that are more directly useful to biological and clinical researchers. You can see as an example here of a couple of different tasks. The TREX genomics task, the performance that has been observed doubled over time. BioASQ is a question answering task. This is a very difficult high-level natural language processing task. And the best score achieved was increased from about 50% to about 70, which is a 40% increase. These to look at text mining methods in general, there's primarily three different types. One is the lexical, or based on dictionaries and so on. Second is listed here, the rule-based, which uses patterns and grammars and is very, requires a lot of domain expert participation in order to work well. And for this reason, much more popular has been the statistical methods, which include machine learning and also deep learning, which we'll be discussing in depth today. This type of task, rather than requiring patterns or so on, uses training data, which is labeled by domain experts, and more recently has been able to take advantage of training data that may not be quite as carefully labeled. So it might be labeled partially by automation or perhaps even non-experts. Realistically, most every text mining system is to some degree a hybrid. Even very high quality deep learning systems, just as an example, I recently finished a chemical named entity recognition system identifying chemicals in text. And while it was overall performed much better than any of my previous work, I still had to implement a rule-based pattern to reduce if it ever returned a chemical that didn't include any letters or numbers, then as just punctuation to set that aside, because that was not a valid chemical, which it did very occasionally. So most systems are hybrids. We can see this is a recent survey review paper talking about all of the recent advances. This is a very fast-moving area. Quite a bit of work has been done recently advancing the state of the art. Popular methods for machine learning are not just the deep learning methods, which we'll be covering in depth today. More methods that are have a longer history include conditional random fields, the CRFs. This is for sequence labeling tasks. Also support vector machines. And even logistic regression can be quite useful depending on the task that we're addressing. The deep learning methods that are becoming very popular include convolutional neural networks. These were originally introduced for addressing image classification tasks, and have also found use in biomedical text mining. In addition, because in working with text, the most typical input is sequences of words, we often work with methods called recurrent neural networks or long short-term networks, which long short-term memory networks that allow classification of sequences, and which we'll be discussing in much more depth in the next section. And then a little later, we will also be covering transformers, such as the very popular and very high-performing BERT model. It's important to know, though, that even with all of the advances, text mining is still not perfect. You can see, as an example here, this is the Pub Tator central system. These methods are being applied. Each of these systems are being applied to different entity types and identifying them over all of PubMed and PubMed Central. And these performances, you can see, range from in the 80% range. So while the performance is often quite good, we also still continue to have errors that need to be addressed, and so additional work is required. But also, that means that while text mining can be extremely useful, especially from an automation perspective, a wide coverage perspective, it's also important to integrate with other techniques and methods. As I've mentioned, this is a fast-moving area. There's methods that are currently being looked at in the literature as being able to advance the state of the art. Several of these are listed here. One of them, the first one, multitask learning, is an approach that allows training a system using multiple data sets or different tasks, and if done correctly, allows the system to learn some patterns that it can then apply between tasks, and which will allow it to increase performance on both tasks simultaneously. Partially because these systems require so much training data, unsupervised learning, one example of which is adversarial learning, is certainly an approach that's being considered and addressed. Or for similar reasons, semi-supervised learning, which includes both fully supervised data and then unsupervised data where it's learning from data that is not fully labeled. These techniques are likely to be more influential in the future and to continue increasing performance and pushing the envelope of what's possible. And of course, one of the important aspects is that practical systems will almost always include hybrids of different approaches. Worth noting is a recent article which I published with some of my co-authors on tips for ensuring that your own article is ready for text mining to interpret. The main idea here is that any article which is more easily interpreted by text mining systems, well, not only will it be a little easier for your readers to interpret, but also it'll be easier for them to discover it and to and then for others to build on top of. I'd like to acknowledge these slides were originally Dr. Liu's, and so I'd like to acknowledge the co-organizers here, along with several slides which were pulled from work by Lars Jensen and also Kevin Cohen. We have just one moment, I believe, for a quick question. And let's see here. If not, we'll go ahead and head towards a quick 5-minute break.